Hello, and welcome to the Agility and Bloom podcast. We are here with the amazing Dr. Marie Belle Pérez Rivera and with the amazing co-host. Do you want to say your name?
No.
Not yet. Well, this is Zoe Akumani, my daughter, and I'm going to say Astro Zoe, even though she allows me to say that sometimes. She wants to be an astronaut. Okay, just Zoe. And my name is Dr. Stephanie Akumani. And I always tell people to remember how to pronounce our last name by saying Akumani and think about your kneecap. Then everybody's like, oh, yes, Akumani. But we're so happy to have Marie Belle here today. She is an amazing scholar, an amazing artist, yoga instructor, wellness leader. Like literally, that's what I would like. If I had to pick one thing from what I see, I would call you a wellness leader. And you seem to be very aware that everyone is a leader, and it's just like taking ownership that one can be a leader. I'll say one thing before I ask you a question. The thing that I actually put it as the last question, but I'm going to bring it to the top because out of everything you taught us during the yoga teacher training with Flow Yoga Center in DC, but online, it was that as a yoga instructor, it's important to be the most stable person in the room as much as you can be, right? The most sturdy person, the most steady person. And I think it's important because it shows us that we can own our power and find a sense of calm within a storm. So I just want to thank you for modeling that and being transparent about the times when it's not so easy to do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. I'm over here smiling.
Great. That's a good effect.
I had never, I like your use of saying I'm a wellness leader. So it's like, oh, wow, that is very much holistic. That's incorporating every aspect of what I believe is important to me. So whether we're talking mental health, physical health, emotional health, and then spiritual well-being. Mm-hmm. So thank you. And you already touched on the power piece, which I think is another aspect of why we appreciate each other's work about empowerment, empower with each other. So thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah. And you said you were going to ask a question. Was that
well, yeah, I'll
or is that
I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna hold myself accountable to the order because I put it at the end on purpose, but I just wanted to bring it up so that it's at the forefront and at the end, because I think with so much going on in the world, it's easy to not feel sturdy, not feel steady, and not feel stable. But just hearing someone say it, you can go ahead and address it if you want to. I mean, it's so juicy. What do you think about that?
We can talk about it and through it with all of it. But one of the main things I really appreciate saying and understanding and how I view everything is everything that happens to us, through us, for us, in front of us, behind our back, in our head, is imprinted in the body, in the psyche, whether we're talking musculature, psychological stuff, emotional responses. And when I was sharing that piece of it is a teacher's job to be the most stable person in the room, I also teach it at the end of our course, which is usually around physical adjustments, when we're going to physically approach someone and make that type of physical connection. Mm-hmm. And I always share it is our job to be the most stable person. So we could take it from a very physical perspective that we're going and we're part of being stable is being present.
Yes.
Right. And so when we're present, we're aware of what's going on, not just with the person that we are practicing with, but within ourselves. Right. And so if I'm going to approach Zoe, I'm aware of what her patterns have been throughout. And I may stand next to her and see how she responds. Yes. That's part of being stable. It's like, wait, I noticed Zoe kind of flinched when I walked by her, so I'm not going to touch her.
Right.
Right. Maybe I'll call her name out and see if she wants to connect in that way. So part of being stable is also being receptive, because we're so present. Can one be receptive and pick up on each other's needs? Mm-hmm. For a while in my life, I experienced that I'm very receptive or porous. And so for my system, a word I've been using is like my nervous system is contagious, or I pick up on other people's stuff.
Totally.
Right. And so Now, coming back to being the most stable person in the room, can I be aware that this is not my stuff, yet I am here to be able to hold space so this person can carry it with a little bit more alignment, with a little bit more integrity, right? And we could talk about it strictly in the physical, but then gradually we could also talk about the breath and how one could slow down the breath and work with the nervous system, the imprints in that world.
And what are the benefits? Well,
go ahead.
If you wouldn't mind, I think that's a great segue. What are the benefits? Because I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, but also conflict resolution and social emotional learning, both with adults and youth. And both groups, adults and youth, no matter where they are on the developmental spectrum, meaning like in their stages of human development, often when someone's upset, someone's told to take a deep breath, calm down, right? But in fact, even though that's the best advice ever, it's usually said in a tone that is not encouraging. And look, Zoe said, she knows because, sometimes I tell Zoe that often, but now I'm aware, I'm receptive to how I say it. So my question would be, what are the benefits of taking a deep breath, slowing the breath to calm ourselves and find a sense of peace? Yeah, what are the benefits? How should we take that advice?
Yeah, so I feel like there are several points I want to talk to there. And one is for Zoe, for example, the way she responded. She's like, yeah, I've gotten that. How did it feel for you to receive that? For anyone to be like, so in general, it might just be like, you didn't like her response originally was like, I don't like that, right? And so in regards to that, for example, when we are the recipient of someone telling us to take a deep breath, the main thing is someone telling us because it's for our own well-being, or is it because it's uncomfortable, the situation that we're in, and we're trying to control another person's actions, right? And so that's why I think often when someone's like, just take a deep breath and chill out, it may not be well received because we are uncomfortable in a situation, and that's our way of possibly gaining control.
Definitely.
Now, going into your question in regards to what are the benefits of it, it's interesting that you introduced Zoe as Astro Zoe because this comes from Astro Studies, cosmonauts specifically.
Yes.
And there's a study on resonance breathing. I believe, Stephanie, you and I have talked about it before, but I'll talk about it a little bit here, where one can match, their inhalation and exhalation can be even, but there can be resonance there. And specifically, one slows down the breath, maybe to about 6 breaths per minute, right? And what's been found when that happens is their state of homeostasis occurs in the body. When we're in homeostasis, we're the most stable person in the room. We're the most present person in the room. We are able to take in information, and rather than react unconsciously or impulsively, we can take in and assess and respond, right? And so when we're in a settled, stable space, breathing slowly and consciously, we have more power, and I'm doing that in air quotes, but we have more choice. Power is about choice. So we have more choice in how we respond. When we are out of sorts, our breath could be shallow, quick, or just erratic. And so our responses could be shallow, quick, and erratic. When we're taking deeper breaths, we can take a little bit more complex understanding of what we're receiving, what is actually being said or what is happening, how that impacts us, and then live in the space in between, right? Definitely. So this could also be from nonviolent communication, where I'm hearing what you're saying, all the while it's being colored by my experiences with the words you've used. Or, for example, take a deep breath. Right. For me, that may have been in my past received in a way that was muting my experience.
That's a good example.
Right? And so I may respond from an older imprint rather than a present moment imprint. And so in general, slowing down the breath will help us be more present. And if we're talking from the nervous system, possibly be a little bit more in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest, digest, restore, recover, reproduce, anything that feels safe, right? So another way to say it is we feel safer, usually. Of course, if it's way too slow, that's a whole other thing. But in general, having a coherent breath. or even pattern throughout.
Definitely. That's so helpful. And I love your responses because my goal with, well, I should say our goal, Zoe's as well, is to merge the practical with the scientific. So thank you for bringing in these very like digestible bites for many of the audience who will be very interested in evidence-based psychology, but also the human experience, because I think so often we separate those into camps, like this is scientific and this is not, and it's not really helpful. And it's not really, well, I'll say it's not helpful to the everyday person who's not an academic. And I should note that you do have a PhD in developmental and biological psychology with a focus on emotions and culture from Virginia Tech University. And I think that that's important for many reasons, but mostly because you chose to go that route, but also for others to see that you can be a multi-passionate entrepreneur and academic, because many of the people who will be watching this, we both have our PhDs, and a lot of women and a lot of women of color will just so happen to be watching this, and a lot of multi-passionate women will be watching this, and people in general. And that's a beautiful drawing, and it happens to be flowers. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, and congratulations on your PhD.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so my background, I have a PhD in developmental and biological psychology. And one of the things that it's social emotional learning, emotional development.
And we have a lot of teachers who will be listening and principals, so that's helpful.
Yeah. For my master's, what was interesting is I was interested in understanding parents' beliefs, specifically mothers' beliefs about children's emotions, how those beliefs impact how they talk to their children, how that talk impacts how children understand emotions, right? And it was just phenomenal to see that connection. And then for my PhD, I always study multiple lenses and do mixed methods approach.
Me too.
So for my PhD, I happened to also pick up a graduate certificate in women's studies. And I started realizing that women are often studied as a part of a dyad in relation to their children, in relation to their husbands, in relation to their parents. In some way, there's always a second part, which isn't right or wrong. It was just a pattern I didn't want to unconsciously continue. So for my PhD, I removed the children. I was like, all right, let's take the children out for a moment and let's just study women. And so I looked at ethnic identity. I really care about culture and how that impacts all of our beliefs.
Same.
And so I looked at ethnic identity specifically with Latino women and how they identified within that world and how that impacts their beliefs about emotions, but also how that impacts the messages one is receiving about what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a mother. And I asked, what was a helpful message you received? Would you pass it on to Zoe? What was a not helpful message you received? Would you pass it on to Zoe?
Right.
And for me, a logical perspective, and as a non-mother, I'm a childless woman, I would think that if you received a message that is not helpful, that you wouldn't pass it on to Zoe.
Right.
But that wasn't the case at all. Often, women would repeat, I call them, I don't call them, in Spanish, they're called dichos and consejos, which could be refrains or sayings, proverbs, however you understand them, that are passed down and they're considered cultural blueprints, right? So it's a woman's role to do this.
Right.
Or, why are you studying? You're going to be too smart for your own good. That kind of vibe,
Too smart to get a husband, right? One of the reasons that it's too smart for your own good. Maybe we can all be smart.
Messages. And I would ask, did you find them helpful or not helpful, true or untrue? And some of them, many messages were untrue, unhelpful, and still being passed on because they were stamped with the word culture.
Yes.
It's part of our culture. I want my child to understand our culture. But there wasn't so much critical thinking involved. And so I did that. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. And then gradually, after I graduated from my PhD, I taught psychology at George Washington University. And I really cared more about critical thinking. I'm not concerned with whether you agree with me or not. I would like to create dialogue where we can talk about the discrepancies and
Yes.
kind of understand different worlds and understand them not as pole opposites, but as an ongoing dialogue towards and with one another. And so I did that obviously through psychology, but then gradually with young adults, and now yoga has kind of taken over, and it's more with the self.
Yeah.
All the messages or all the scriptures that I've read, how does this apply to me? Is it helpful or not? Why am I still criticizing myself or judging myself or holding myself to these standards that don't necessarily apply? So bringing it back to the world, the three-dimensional, like, if it doesn't apply to me, or if it's not based on direct experience, does it really need to carry as much weight? Is another piece. But all of that to say, yeah, I studied academic, and I did do mixed methods approach. And I'm still, the process is fascinating to me. And I believe that the power is in the choice in the process, and how active we are in that process, critical of thinking or not.
Right. Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. This is just, these are the type of conversations that I found and still find many of my colleagues and even my husband and I having all the time. And I feel like they're in silos. And that's one reason that I was really adamant about starting a podcast again. I did Blooming as a Habit podcast before for 2 seasons, and it was amazing. And I really wanted to start that again after my dad passed away, because it was just so like life hit, like, I won't say it hit hard actually. Yoga actually helped me to find a lot of peace with that process and see it as a natural, like it amazes me as a third person to even say it like so calmly, to see death as a natural process. Yeah, it is, Zoe. I agree. And Zoe being there the whole time, witnessing. I mean, you were there the whole time. And I know that this wasn't in the list of questions, but I'll just make a statement about it just because of the natural flow. But what I found yoga and meditation to do, and that focus, like reorienting, what do I know about the self now that I'm observing my thoughts? And what was I told in society about how I was supposed to feel about someone being sick, someone having cancer, someone dying, right, in hospice, and me having to take care of them? Yoga literally, I will say this, yoga and meditation literally saved my life, because it made me sturdy, and running. Yeah. And Zoe knows this narrative. We talk about it all the time, because it gave me a context to be grounded in myself so that I could understand that death was just as, to me, after taking deep reflection on what it really was, is just like a flower, right? Our life cycle, we're in bloom, and then there's a decline. And it doesn't take away from the beauty we experienced with that flower before. But anyway, I just want to, it's amazing thinking about the biological nature of our mindset and our culture, because our culture is just our ideas, beliefs, and practices. So putting those things to practice and recognizing that we can do surgery on them is so important. I always think about mindset surgery. I just wanted to say that, but
yeah. No, and I'm totally with you. I resonate with what you're saying as well. And when you're calling them like these reorienting experiences, or experience, I used to, I was raised Catholic, and so religion was a very informative piece to my emotions and my beliefs. And a big part that happened throughout my life is I started having experiences that weren't necessarily answered, or like particular proverbs or pleasant platitudes that people would share weren't helpful anymore. Right. And again, it's going back to this desire to control or to think we know what's happening. And so often it's like, oh, like when is someone making us trying to make us feel better so they're more comfortable? Or there's times in our lives where there's nothing to say, where there's just experience to be had and emotions to be felt, and grief is one of them, right? And so for me, I suffered quite a bit. And then I remember someone introduced this concept of rites of passage. And the death of a loved one, obviously, like, it's a whole process and it'll be with you forever. And it's also, like, for me, when I was present with loved ones passing, it was it was an honor
Totally.
to also be there. And again, it's a rite of passage where at times life could be bifurcated a little bit, and there's a before that happened and an after.
Yes.
Right. And there's a lot of growth to be had there. There's also a lot of wounds that could be dealt with. But for me, it was from an empowerment perspective, was seeing it as a rite of passage.
Yes.
And rites of passages are not easy.
No.
And they happen to all of us, just in different ways, whether it's your family member or this person's brother, or, you know, we're all going through different things at different times. And it's not about speeding up the process. Again, going back to the process, everything takes time. So, yeah.
Definitely. No, thank you for that. I love that. And I think I'm glad you brought up grief, because that definitely, I think maybe the way I said it, it jumped to the empowerment part and didn't talk about the emotional breakdown that happened before in order to get there. So I'm grateful that you said that, because it definitely was a journey. But after having that breakdown, I was actually pregnant with Zoe at the time. That was Zoe, that can be heard in the mic. If you could just do it on the paper. Thank you so much. I remember my husband saying, I was crying like profusely. He was like, it's okay to feel upset, scared, unsure, but whatever you do is now affecting Zoe as well. Because we had named her by then, because we knew, you know, yeah, we had agreed. So it's affecting Zoe. And that shifted everything for me. It was like, okay, I need to figure this out, because that is a no-go for me. I can feel sad, but maybe I can calm down my sadness so I can be more clear-headed and feel it not so largely, because I don't want to do damage to this person that's coming to the planet. And and it was, he said it in such a loving way that it wasn't like, you need to calm down. So I appreciate it. Like you said, really tuning into how people feel. I think that's such an important skill. And yes, and I think it's important for everyone, but I'll say because of our audience, especially, we have a lot of educators from different spectrums, thinking about how we're working with our colleagues, if we're working with children or young adults, those who may consider themselves elderly, like looking at these different developmental stages and thinking, how can I change my tone, change my body language? Now, when I say change, I don't mean not be authentic, but where's the middle ground between how you feel and what's going to get you where you need to be and where, you know, both of you need to be. And I think that's that tuning, that reprogramming that you talk about. And I love your video, the yoga and poetry video on YouTube. I'll definitely put a link. It is so beautiful. So I should go down to that. I'm going to switch in. Sorry, I took us a little off, but you have a question?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Question one.
Oh, I talked about question one. Thanks for keeping. Oh, you know what? She answered that. I'm going to go to question one because you answered it, but Zoe's keeping me in check. I'll go to question one, Marie Belle.
Question one?
Question one is, thanks, Zoe. What does physical, emotional, and mental agility mean to you? And how do you remind yourself that you're in bloom?
Well, agility for me has so many different aspects, but on a very brief understanding would be a willingness and capacity to be present and see multiple perspectives, right? And so part of agility is being able to pivot when you need to. Part of agility is ability to be strong and ability to, and willingness. It's both ability and a willingness to be with what is, whether we're talking in a health perspective, in a physical perspective or in a mental perspective. Also in the process, developing a tremendous amount of empathy for yourself and the process of being human, as well as those one is engaging with. I could go into the physical,
please, because a lot of yoga instructors and fitness enthusiasts will be listening as well. We have such a wide, that's why I said wellness leader. It's the whole shebang. Please, yeah.
Okay, so in regards to physical agility, I mean, from a very physical, tangible point, flexibility and strength, right? A big portion, whether it's on my education, of my practice, is understanding things. Obviously, at first, we learn in a very dualistic way. If I become more flexible, I'm not as strong. If I become really strong, I'm going to lose my flexibility, which on the surface level may appear to be true. The deeper we go into it, the more we start seeing their interrelatedness and how they can help each other. And so for me, a big part of agility was taking it out of the polarizing concept and more into a spectrum, and understanding spectrums of thought, spectrums of physical prowess, spectrums of mental agility as well. And so from a physical level, also for me, it was removing a lot of phobias I had about my body. Specifically, like if you hyperextend your elbow, or that, you're hypermobile, you're going to hurt yourself, or this, there's a lot of fear being used to keep people in line.
Yes.
Whether we're talking on a physical level, whether we're talking emotional, political, any of that, fear is often used because it works, right? Because we're emotional beings. And so I wanted, part of agility was being able to see through that. And also see the purpose, like as a yoga teacher, I want to keep my people safe. So sometimes I might say an overarching statement. All the while recently, I've been like, you all, that's not an absolute truth. That's just for now, because I'm teaching 50 of you online.
Right.
So in general, I want to keep you safe, generally speaking. The deeper we go into it, the more we can see that if you're stronger, you can actually, your alignment could look different, right? If you're more flexible, your pose might look different. One isn't right, one isn't wrong. So agility for me is moving beyond the poles.
I love that.
Right? I was just having a conversation with someone totally unrelated, but he was like, okay, so as a parent, we teach our children right and wrong, correct? And I was like,
no, we shouldn't. Yeah, that's a tricky one.
I'm not a parent. So what I think is we have these ideas that there's a black and a white world, but really context matters.
Yes.
So again, context is part of agility, willingness to see lenses, perspectives, experiences that could shape this person or this body or this thought pattern. And so agility would be a willingness and an ability to see beyond surface level.
Thank you for saying that. Okay. I was just giving a talk yesterday at in Wilmington, Delaware, and it was called Wilmington Friend School, and they are so awesome. So hello, Wilmington Friend School. And we were talking about this. I was leading a professional development for the staff, faculty and staff, and we were talking about this cultural iceberg, so like what you said, see beyond the surface, thinking about culture, again, the ideas, beliefs, and practices that we as humans have. But we think we can size somebody up sometimes by like seeing, the color of their skin and, okay, based on what I see, like someone might see me and they're like, oh, are you from Jamaica? And I'm like, well, not to my knowledge, but I love dreadlocks. And I know a lot of people there have that style, but I have it and I'm not Jamaican, and that's cool. But you might also see me, if you were come to my house, use a lot of curry powder because I love curry powder on everything. And we really do like curry powder. And that's because I was grateful and lucky enough to go to Trinidad and Tobago for study abroad, right? But then they might say, oh, well, you went on study abroad, you must be rich. And then what you don't see below the iceberg is that I actually was on scholarship to do that. And I was super grateful. But it would have been fine if I was rich too, because everybody's fine as they are. And we can learn a lot from each other. Oh, that is beautiful. I love it. And, I think it's important for us to be curious, right? To be curious about each other, yet to be mindful and curious about our tone and what do we want to really learn? Like, do we want to fit them in a box based on what we already know? Or do we really want to get to know about what they like and not just fit it into, oh, well, that's what people in Trinidad do, right? I'm just throwing that out. So I really thank you for what you just said. I think it's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ability and willingness to see the diversity within our perceived boxes, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So here's another question.
You were going to do something earlier. I
Hint.
don't know. It was in regards to the YouTube video. Or was that a tangent?
Oh, yes, I was. There's so many great questions. Yes, let me find that one. It was about rerouting.
Oh yeah, how
Yeah.
I felt.
Yes.
So
with
in that
yoga.
video, I talked about what yoga is to me, or how a practice impacted me.
I can
Did
ask
you
you the
have a
question.
question about
Yeah,
it?
I finally found it. Thanks,
Okay.
Zoe.
Question 2.
Nice job, Zoe. She keeps me in line. I appreciate it. Thank you, Zoe. Good job. All right. So the question is, how can yoga, but I put in parentheses because when I learned about yoga, I didn't know it meant also meditation. I did not know the word asana. I just figured movement. So I'm classifying just in the time yoga, if we think about it along the lines of asanas, the philosophies that go along with it, and meditation. How can these help us heal? How can yoga help us heal from past trauma, a lack of confidence, toxic relationships, whatever you want to choose out of those? But also, how did it help you follow your inner compass and intuition to design a life of your dreams? I know it's a big question.
This is a huge question.
I know. So you can just pick and choose.
Phenomenal, very thoughtful question. There's so many pieces to it. So in regards to practice, and from my experience, I started a deeper practice through the Mysore method. And so Mysore is a practice where one goes into a studio or a room or a shala, a temple, however you want to call it, and one just begins to practice, right? And so I'm moving at my own pace, and gradually the teacher is helping me build a practice. And so my whole first month was learning sun salutation A, do 5 of them, go home, practice.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. There was no goal for me to become flexible or strong or lose weight or gain. Like, it wasn't any of that. It was strictly just gradually I wanted to be able to be by myself. And what I mean by that is be able to sit with myself.
Yeah.
So often people are drawn to yoga for something, whether it's healing, growing, letting go, rebuilding, right? And for me, that wasn't so clear right away. I just wanted to learn because it seemed intriguing. And so the next month I learned Sun B, next month I learned standing. Regardless, the whole concept was on building a personal practice. And that personal practice is in silence.
Yeah.
So for me, I learned to sit with myself in silence. When that happens, I was able to go inwards and see all of the stuff that I had been overlooking or burying deep down inside or not wanting to look at or had stored away to process at a later time.
And when you say stuff, just to be clear for those who have tried to delve into meditation, what do you mean by stuff? Just to be clear, like, do you mean, I hear thoughts and feelings when you say stuff?
It could be thoughts, it could be feelings, it could be imprints, it could be memories, it could be patterns, it could be the way we talk to ourselves. Like, if I just sit in silence for 5 minutes and listen to the way I talk to myself, that will change so much,
yes,
right?
It will.
And so my first introduction to that was via Mysore, via an asana practice, Ashtanga specifically. And I was like, wow, these thoughts are on constant loop in my head. I'm really mean to myself. I'm constantly judging myself in this black and white world when I technically do not believe in a black and white world, right? And so those were certain imprints. And then it could even go into memories, flashbacks, trauma. For me, in my life, I have purposefully forgotten or purposefully erased particular experiences from my life, because if I were to process them at that time, I would have fallen apart, right? Or the world would have come crashing down or whatever. It wasn't time for me to process it. And so as I began practicing, I started having flashbacks of stuff that I hadn't been thinking of. And so in that regards, I was aware that there was a lot I needed to deal with that was unconsciously impacting all of my relationships, how I view my work, how I view myself, how I treat myself and my body and my relationships. It also impacted my awareness of my attachments,
Yes.
whether secure, insecure, anxiety, depression, all of that. And so basically, asana practice and mindful movement would show me what's hidden under the surface. And I'm pretty sure I'm not done.
Yeah.
But
It's a
gradually,
constant process.
I'm aware of that. The beautiful thing is, for me, my teachers genuinely cared for me as a person. I'm sharing that because when I learned yoga, yoga wasn't something people became. That wasn't a career people did for money. That was just something this particular person was attracted to and saw it as a tool for healing and wanted to share it with the community.
Right.
This person's career was somewhere else. The reason I'm sharing that is because that connection was different than it is if I just go to a studio and the person's doing it for money and they're not interested in the deeper aspects of what can happen in a really holistic yoga practice.
Right.
And so another way to say that is with yoga, I also established a new community, a community that was willing to sit with the uncertainty and to refer resources, whether it's of mental health, of physical well-being, of chiropractors, of massage, of writing courses, of meditation. And so yoga really helped me rebuild my life and look at my thoughts, work with my body, use the resources and not have shame around it. Because often, obviously, it could be access to resources, which I had told myself I didn't have access to. But then gradually, it was a willingness to ask for help.
Right.
And so with yoga and that practice and that community, I wasn't shamed for asking for help. It was kind of a given that the teacher was there for the student's benefit and not to be put on a pedestal and not to be like paid thousands of dollars. It was strictly just a community of people looking out for each other. And so it helped me in that way. And it also helped me be quiet, like be silent with myself, because my mind is very busy. And it can create a lot of stories and narratives that feel to be true, but aren't the only truth, right? So for me, it helped me with that. I'm aware there was a lot more to the question.
No,
So I feel like I went more into the trauma and
that's important.
asana.
No, that's perfect. The other part, well, I'll just, if I could just address one thing you said, that I think pairs with what you said about fear and limiting beliefs. I never knew until I heard the term limiting beliefs. I never knew that my beliefs could be limiting to myself, right? So I didn't know I was getting in my own way. I forgot exactly what you just said. I was taking it on, but I was like, I don't remember that phrase, but I'm paraphrasing you. You basically, it gets back again to the choice. Like you had to make a choice around resources. You had to make a choice to, instead of saying, I don't have resources, it sounds to me that the community, the culture that the yoga communities that you entered offered, they made it clear that we are a resource. And that also, it sounds, empowered you to realize you had a choice to ask for help. And then I'm imagining with the internet, right, and more stable and helpful resources, which is another question coming up soon, how did technology help you in your life and as an entrepreneur? But what I'm saying is that I think for all of us to realize what are our fears, we can think about false expectations appearing real, right? I love that, because if we realize we have what are expectations around anything, and are they real? And if they are real now, do they have to stay that way? Zoe was tired. We had a really late night, and I could have been like, oh my goodness, this is not going to work. Yet Zoe's doing such a great job, because I've decided to just say, this is going to go super well. I've just decided it. And then I let the chips fall where they may. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I think so.
I mean, I think to an extent that is wonderful, to be able to be like, wait, like I planned for this. This is going to happen. It's going to go great. There's also, I'm in a different part right now because of like the pandemic for the last 20 months. And I'm like, am I having a midlife crisis?
I don't even know that it was 20 months. The fact that you've been counting, I didn't even know. No, it's fine. It's just like, thanks for, everything's a blur to me a bit. So wow, 20 months.
Time has warped.
That's a long time.
I've been going through this process of realizing that I have idealist and romantic beliefs, right? And so if I think it's so, it will be. And to an extent, I believe for the 95% of the human population, it's helpful to look at thoughts and go there. And that is a stage in the process, is to look at thoughts and change them towards abundance, towards manifesting, towards positive regard, compassion, all of that. And now I'm at a point where I was just like, wait, I can't believe myself out of this pandemic or out of this thing. So to an extent is, how do I handle being tired or grieving? Or so now I'm focused more on the how rather than what I'm thinking.
Which is the navigating, right? You said that that context matters.
Yeah.
You know, it's like holding on to the, because it's, I really resonate with that. Holding on to, because I'm always looking into the idea of manifesting and abundance and getting out of a scarcity mindset. I didn't know these things existed until I knew. So if you don't even know that these are modes of operating, like these are software that you're running, it's hard to even jump to the other side of thinking abundantly within the context. So like, how can we make the lemonade out of the lemons?
Yeah. No, I think it's important. I like your metaphor with upgrading your system. And so your operating system is constantly, not constantly, but it's being updated. In the process, we also experience glitches in that. And maybe that's what I'm speaking to, is where I'm at right now, that I'm just like, wait, like something needs to shift in me, at least recently. But you had mentioned two things. One was in regards to conditioned fears, which might be towards that question. But I also wanted to speak to. Part of this practice also led me to start looking at my fears. You call them conditioned fears, which is amazing because when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of them as inherited fears. So conditioned fears, inherited fears. And so these are fears of my ancestors, of my mother, of my, the women in my family, and the fears that we've been led to believe in and embody to keep ourselves, quote unquote, safe.
Right.
And so with this practice, I work silently with the community, with my body, and I started to learn to trust my body, not just my beliefs, right? And so one of the most pertinent examples for me was I was traveling through India by myself, and I was in this fisherman's village, and so they didn't really have power. And I was on the beach and I was walking. It was just a 1 mile walk, but I found a coffee shop or a tea bar or whatever. And I spent a lot of time there journaling and praying and all the stuff when you feel very connected and you're very grateful. And all of a sudden it became dark and I was like, I should start heading home.
Oh, like you lost sense of time.
No power. Yeah.
Oh, the power. No power. Okay, got it. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I understand.
I mean, there's power until a certain time, until like 7 p.m., 8 p.m. And then everything's shut off. And as I'm walking home, my phone died. And so it was just like, I noticed my heartbeat going up and I started like really getting concerned that something major is going to happen. Here's a single woman traveling by herself with no phone in a country she doesn't know. And I'm walking through these little pockets where fishermen just sleep. They're not even houses. And so like I could easily wake someone up and then they do things to me.
Right. That was the fear time.
So that's the story. That's the general narrative that a woman by herself has lived with, whether experienced directly or consistently reminded of. And I remember being like, wait, but no, like technically I feel safe here. Like I feel safe here. And, obviously I oriented myself towards home. I oriented myself towards my environment. And I was like, do you realize how beautiful the stars are right now?
Yes.
Or how quiet it is right now? Or how at peace the entire community is right now? But here my mind is throwing off all these signals, not based on direct experience, based strictly on conditioned thoughts that are thousands of miles away.
I was thinking that, right. I was literally thinking that like the location can influence your fear. Keep going. No, I just totally resonate with that.
And so I just remember getting home and I was just like, what a trip. Right. So I watched like different parts of myself talk to each other throughout that whole trip or throughout the whole walk. And I was like, I am safe. I am supported. Obviously, like I can keep saying that. And I am aware of my surroundings. And nothing happened.
Right.
Nothing happened.
Right. And if you're looking for
And
something, you kind of like your eye will. Now, I'm not an expert at this, but I would encourage people to research, and I will too, the reticular activating system, because it talks a lot about this, like what you look like. Say, like I remember I went to college, and my dad, he got a Dodge Chrysler minivan or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, make and model, but I tell you, I kept, because now they're gone, right? 18 years of living with them. And he just got this car and now they're gone. I saw that car on campus all the time. And I'm always like, is that my dad on campus? Like, is he checking on me? And I'm not going to go deeper than that because I'm not an expert in that area. But the idea of like, we need to be mindful about what we look for and put our energy on what we want to bring to us or what we want to create. And then be ready for things to not go as planned. And I think this, whether you're going towards a law of attraction way or more of a practical way or I don't want to say, I'm not trying to make a distinction. Well, I'm making a distinction. That's interesting. What am I trying to do? This is the conditioning. Because I'm trying to make it clear that no matter, yes, no matter where you stand, because I feel like there are many models of what we say is happening in the universe, yet I try to find what works well for me in each one. Oh, it's always keeping okay. She's got me. She said it's time to go to question 3. Well, this will be.
Well, I'm listening to you and I'm resonating with what you're saying.
Yeah, please go ahead.
A big piece that has been coming up for me when I'm listening is like, it also depends on what stage of development you're in. And so there are certain beliefs that will really exponentially speed up your growth, right? And then once you have grown, let go of that belief, because now there's going to be a whole nother experience that could easily talk back to that belief. And it's time to kind of reshape that, right? So I was talking to the same parent recently. We were talking about fluidity versus fixed. And often in our society, we have been trained to think that identities are fixed.
Yes, we have.
Or
I am this way.
Is how Zoe is, and she's going to be like this forever.
Exactly.
You've always been this type of child. You've always been this kind of woman. And it's just like, I'm a fluid being, and experience shapes me. And so what would happen? What would happen if one allowed oneself to be fluid? It doesn't mean to be like manic and to like totally go up. If your body needs to do that to explore the pole, like I'm quite extreme. So I noticed that the pendulum is always swinging with me. And so for 10 plus years, I was vegan and vegetarian, and I believe that was the way to go. My body rebelled. I got very, very sick.
Mine did
and
too.
So I was medically put on a ketogenic diet to recover, which is animal protein. Obviously, I tried vegan keto. It didn't work. I needed to go on like animal protein, and that worked. So that's what I mean by, for my body and my learning experience, things are constantly, the pendulum is swinging, reminding me there is no such thing as a fixed identity for me.
Totally. Right. It's a choice. It's the power that we have, and it's a choice. And once we recognize that it's a choice, we don't need to get upset about that concept, but realize that we have a lot of power and agency to create the life that we want. And of course, that might take time. Well, I'm not even going to say might. It will take time, right? And effort. And that doesn't mean a long time, and it doesn't mean a short time, but it just means time and effort. And I think that's what I love about the concept of agility. It's like, how can we think about things and move in the direction towards our dreams with more ease and more quickness? And the reason, I don't think everything needs to be quick, but I think that we often don't realize that with more belief in oneself and reaching out to resources that can help us, we can actually make small steps to get where we need to get very quickly, no matter whether you're a child, a teenager, or an adult. And that's one of the major things that I want. That's one of my life goals, to help individuals, I'm going to say, manifest their dreams and realize that it's not just like woo-woo spirituality, and it's not just like motivational psychology. It can be whatever you want, as long as you're being mindful, you're being curious, and you're moving. I like to say keep it moving. I gotta laugh from Zoe.
Keep doing the work, and it's going to be a lot of work.
Yes,
yeah, for sure.
With great power comes responsibility, and it's like I think I used to get upset when I heard like conservative models say, "Pull yourself up by your bootstraps," and I'm like, I don't have any boots, and they'll say, you know, well, go make some, and I don't. Now I'm like, and I'm not going to go into that side because I think there's a lot of problems with pull yourself up by your bootstraps, especially when you don't have any boots or material around and it's being kept from you and your community. But that's a whole other conversation, which we probably don't have time for all the way. Yeah. But I
mean, yeah, there's an overarching, like I also have felt the pressure to be strong and stoic and graceful in the process when it's like, wait, like, no.
Yeah, I need to feel out this moment.
No, like there's so much underneath all of this. And you're speaking about it from the bootstraps perspective and resources and, you know, power dynamics. And for me, I'm like speaking about it in the way one expresses that, right? And one experiences that. Because not just pull up yourself by the bootstraps, but like look good while doing it. Like you're not allowed to fall apart or make mistakes while you're trying to figure out a system.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And those of us many of us who will be listening to this podcast will be at a juncture where we can recognize and or do recognize the power we have to influence the various systems that we choose to come in contact with, and whether that's small or medium or large. And I think all of it is large because it's a step towards whatever one considers to be justice. And I think, and justice for oneself and a community that they care about. I mean, I just love this. I think
this leads perfectly to what you had asked, and I still haven't answered in regards to entrepreneurship and technology.
Yes, please.
It's just like, for me, when I started yoga, was obviously the internet was a thing, but Instagram wasn't. You know, there are particular modes that have totally impacted our society that weren't a thing then. And so for me as an entrepreneur and using yoga as technology and just making my own business, I rejected Instagram at first, right? Because I'm a very judgmental person at first for things I don't understand, right? So I know I don't understand something when I'm being very hypercritical of it, or I'm only being exposed to one side of it. And so for me, when Instagram first came out within the yoga world, it felt very off-putting and narcissistic. Right, to like put pictures of yourself and talk about how great you are, or like quote the Yoga Sutras and how spiritual you are. And so for me, it felt like a facade. Are you asking a question? Oh, okay. And so I saw it more as that because I didn't see it being used in a way that I found useful. Now, fast forward, gradually I saw some of my friends succeeding with it on a business level. And I was like, oh, wait, this is a tool. Technology is a tool. And I can talk all the bad things about a tool, or I can learn how to use it in a different way. Right. And so like, I want a seat at the table if I want to make change. And so I realized that and learning this technology in this world, and this point in time, it was Instagram, would grant me a seat at the table, would give me a microphone, would give me a voice. Because there were so many people who felt entitled to that microphone, and they were succeeding because they weren't holding themselves back, you know?
Right.
And so for me, I started realizing that technology is a tool, and depending on what your goals are, you will use different strategies.
Yes.
So if you want more followers, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. If you want to be well regarded, chances are you might do 1, 2, Z. You know, like it's just like, well, I'm not going to do the first 2 things that person did, but they're on to something with this, right? And so learning different strategies to benefit rather than to reject the tool altogether. And the reason I brought that up in regards to the social justice stuff is in general, I've seen a lot of my mentors at times take on roles like for Nike or for particular community companies that don't have the best child labor laws or the best, climate stuff, or, they're destroying the nature. And what one of my mentors said, she was like, look, I am the first woman who got hired by them in the yoga world. And I understand everyone's concerns. you better believe I want a seat at the table, and I'm going to be the reason things change, because you can't change things if you don't have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
We can talk about it and be aggressive online, but if you are not part of that system,
Right.
it's going to be harder to make change in the system. And so gradually, like going into these worlds, having 2 or 3 years of influence and then stepping out,
Right.
just enough. And in the process, learning the language. If you want to create change, you need to learn the language of the people who are in power.
Learn how to play the game.
Yeah. And so I remember from the yoga world, one of my teachers met me and she was like, "You're a new Johnny." And I was like, "What's a new Johnny?" And she said, "It's someone who comes into this world and learns a system, whether we're talking higher education or Ashtanga yoga or any aspect, any system with Catholicism, whatever. And you learn the language, you like work with it, it works for you. And then you understand it so well, you can flip it on its head
Yes.
and say, well, it's not working for these people. And what about that? Right. And so it's this agility, going back to that.
To create equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so all of that within entrepreneurship, I guess, is just understanding tools and understanding how to have more access to tools and how to use them in a way that you can get your word out, you can empower others, and you can share resources that other people may have never heard of, but because of you, they do.
And,
right?
And I'm going to add, not to add in your words, but in my words, because I would never speak for someone else, but to make money. And the reason I say that is because I worked for nonprofits and I respect them and they're so important. They have their role. But for me, the idea that I can make money coming from an economically disadvantaged family and community was revolutionary. And that I can make a, you say it again? 1 second. Ooh. Excuse me 1 second. Go ahead. Oh. We'll have to edit that part out. All right, you can go ahead.
Oh, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, great. Excellent. But it's all normal.
I just thought she was whispering in your ear.
Great. Yeah. Good job, Zoe. Proud of you. What was I going to say? So, yes, I do. Great job. You were so responsible. Thank you. Good job, Zoe. What was I going to say? Oh, the importance of being able to make money. I think that like you have an idea, you have a passion, and it drives you. And then you can learn and watch ways that other people have created their own systems to generate wealth and then do good, like provide a service. And I was taught of this concept of getting a gift and giving a gift, right? So the gift can be that you receive can be money, and the gift that you give is your unique talent. And I was like, wow, that makes me feel a lot better about money, because I think I had a lot of reservations around money and like that it wasn't good because some people use it in not helpful ways. But what about if I make as much money as I desire and I can also help myself and my family, show up having all the things I need, not worrying about bills being paid, feel safe and secure economically, and help other people? I was like, that's pretty cool too. And it just changed everything for me and pushes me to view creation differently. Because, I mean, some nights, now that I believe in myself, I don't even want to go to sleep. Because like all the ideas are just flowing. And I wonder, like, that's the last question I have for you. And I know we need to end. You talked about in the previous interview, I think it was Kat, I forgot her last name, sorry, but it was an interview you did with someone named Kat, and you talked about your aunt and your aunt saying, oh, where did I write it? It was about flow and currency. And, you know, okay, your aunt likened currency to currents and like water and being in flow. And I was just wondering, like, this is the last question, how do you ride the waves of life and entrepreneurship and step into a flow to make your visions come true?
Yeah, so that particular story was in regards to money. And I made a decision probably like 5 or 6 years ago that money wasn't going to be an issue in my life. And so in that process, I consciously sought out education and people who I admired who had money or didn't have issues with money. And my aunt told me that money in every single country, when you go exchange money, it's called currency exchange. So currency is from the current, it's water, keep it flowing. And if you want to make money, you need to invest money, whatever that means to you. For me, I invest in myself, in my education, in my training, in my health, in my all of that, right? Also, part of that currency is there's an exchange. And so I look to people I admire and I see what they're doing. If they're offering a class, I'm going to take their class. If they're offering a course, I'm going to take their course. And so for yoga, for example, I've done more than 8 yoga teacher trainings as a student.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because I like what Dharma is doing. I like what he's producing, or I like what's going on over here in the forest or in the Anusara world. And so I invested in that regards. It wasn't always with paper money, right? Often I would apply for a scholarship, and often I would get it. And in general, what that means, I was still investing in some way, one way or another. During the pandemic, everything went online. And so all of a sudden I have access to these teachers I've been glorifying in my head, and they're actually teaching a class at Pacific Standard Time. So I started training with them, and I was like, well, I'm going to pay this teacher to learn this practice, but you better believe in the process, I'm noticing what platform they're using.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
noticing what words they're
Thank
using
you for saying that. Yes.
I'm noticing are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? What's their newsletter? How is that structured? And so another way to say it is I use a lot of my mentors as templates.
Yes.
Whether it's a newsletter template or an Instagram template, or sometimes in writing, when I started taking writing more seriously, I read a chapter, and there's some authors that I read a sentence and I stop and I just start writing because the beginning 3 words of that sentence inspired something.
Same here.
And so that's kind of in general how what I was saying in regards to currency is invest in people who are doing what you support or who admire you or who light you up in some way. Now, of course, that could go a whole nother way where you're like the eternal student and wasting all your money all the time.
And not
so
creating
there also
yourself.
has to be a time where we take a pause and we actually integrate. And we actually start integrating and applying and, creating a little bit of a gestation phase where all the influence has already been put in. Now, can we process that?
Yes.
So that was in regards to the currency that you had mentioned with my aunt. In regards to how do I ride the waves is I'm very honest and transparent in the process. So often if I'm going through something, I journal quite a bit if it's dark. And then once I'm able to zoom out enough, meaning it's not specific and I'm not saying Stephanie did this to me today, right? I'm able to zoom out and I can share from a place that's more connected and universal. When the pandemic first hit, within a week, I was learning about Zoom. Within a week, I was learning about
this is the agility part,
stuff.
right? You're being quick. You're like, look, I don't have time to play around. This is my livelihood, and I'm good at this. Well, I shouldn't say that's what you're saying, but I hope you are because you're really amazing at what you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I was just willing to make mistakes on the spot. Yes. Because I'd never used Zoom. So there were plenty of times within the first couple of months that I forgot to hit record. Or totally. That the microphone wasn't actually my microphone, it was a laptop, so it sounded horrible. And so I also knew that most students didn't have experience with Zoom, so they were willing to be more giving, more compassionate, and would be like, don't worry, I'll just take your class next week, right? And so I knew that I was going to have a growth curve in public, which is really uncomfortable. And I shared in that. So often is just willing to make mistakes and being honest about it, being like, I'm doing my best. And if you know of a better microphone, tell me. If you know of a better platform, tell me. If I said something that upset you, a lot was going on last summer and it's still going on all the time, but politically, right? Some students reached out and they were like, I wish you'd say more about this, or I hold you to higher regard. I can't believe you didn't X. And I sat with that and I was like, what do I want to offer? Right? Like, what is my role in this? And do I want to step into this conversation? And there are often times in writing The Waves of Life is like, no, actually, I don't need the microphone right now. It's my turn to listen.
Right.
And if by not posting, people think I'm ignoring an issue, that's on them as well.
Definitely.
You know, like I don't need to step into the ring all the time because I'm still processing quite a bit.
Totally.
And so I think it's just being honest and genuine, and being like, it's my turn to listen. Yeah.
Being willing to have mistakes happen.
Just being present and honest throughout. That's all.
Definitely. And and I appreciate that so much because I think a lot of what I do, it definitely resonates with what you said about making mistakes in public. But it's funny because this will probably be the most public of it, because it's funny. A lot of the messages I give are like empowering because I go through the like struggle and then I'm like, oh man, I found the way through. I need to share that. But I could do more of like, what were the pain points so that people can resonate with the pain points, because that maybe is what they're feeling more. And then showing like, okay, I had these pain points, but this is how I made it to the other side. And that might, even shift the way that we can speak to our I don't want to use the word followers because like I'm following them too. We're all working together. Like even Zoe being here, like I hope that this shows moms or people who may want to have children that you can do it. I got so many messages as I was entering my career and almost finishing my PhD when I was pregnant that was a mistake. What are you doing? And I was like, living my life, just doing what I want. And I respect people who don't want to. But I make it a point to have her here because she's super capable. And today she just didn't want to, yeah, you're super capable. She just didn't want to speak. And I'm like, that's fine, And I appreciate your efforts, Zoe, to be so calm. You did a great job. Thank you. And just to show people, it doesn't matter whatever the thing is that you think you can't do, just do it. Because now I'm pouring that in layers. Okay, just making sure. But I just want to close this out by just thanking you, because I think everything that we said will help so many of the people that we work closely with, the communities that we've cultivated. And I hope that this conversation plants seeds to help people get a little more momentum and realize that they can do that type of emotional surgery, as I call it, through yoga, through meditation, through reflection and mistakes that you make along the way. And just being forgiving and understanding of like your process. And the last thing, how can our audience connect with you?
Thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
Really
Same
wonderful
here.
To talk with you and to see Zoe throughout. For me, you can connect with me in any way. My name's Marie Belle PR. And so it could be Marie Belle PR Instagram, Gmail, mariebellepr.com. It could be on YouTube as well. I'm sure there's other ways. I also teach online. I teach Zoom live and recordings. I have an on-demand library. I have on-demand courses on Roots Love Yoga is my company or my school. So it could be Roots Love Yoga as well. Thank you so much.
Of course. And I'll make sure we put links to all the places they can find you as well. Just so that when they go,
send
they
out
can
a
click.
newsletter at least twice a month.
I love your
would
newsletter.
Like to say they're weekly, but they're not quite weekly.
I always smile when I see it pop up in my inbox. Like, oh, I really like it's I really like it. It's very thoughtful.
So one can sign up that way, and then receive the more the newer stuff, the current changes. Like I'm going to be in Puerto Rico in October.
Nice.
Teaching Spanish yoga teacher trainings. And then I'll be teaching more continuing education for yoga teachers on demand and live.
Wonderful. And I would be remiss to say, you show me the reason that I was so inspired. It was just the vibe you were giving off. And I'm grateful for Flow, you working with Flow Yoga Center in DC. Thank you, Deb. You're awesome as well. And you show me you guys, like please take a look at her Instagram page. It's not just, like you always say, it's not just about contortion, but for a person like me who didn't even know that most of the things you do, and I can see you steadily doing them every day with your body and mind, I didn't even know they were possible, Marie Belle. Like I didn't know they were possible. And it, as a person who had asthma and I couldn't even do anything without having an asthma attack, to move beyond that and now to be able to do the things I can do, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's becoming superhuman and taking your time. I mean, you're just like amazing. Oh, go ahead.
So
So
much.
thank you.
Everything you just shared is so beautiful and keeps me inspired, you know. I post a lot of my practice and the output of that practice, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes that's going on, and it's, again, just like constantly putting the work in, whatever that looks like. For me, in a physical world, it looks like doing more practice and kind of giving ink to the experience, whether it's through what I'm writing or the poses I'm doing or the random flows I'm sharing, and just kind of putting that out in the visual possibility, you know, the visual realm of possible options of what could happen, whether with the body, with life, with writing. So it really means a lot to me that you receive it and you resonate with it.
Thank you so much. Well, have a beautiful day, and thank you. And for the audience, please, thank you so much for being here with Agility and Bloom. And we hope that this resonated with you. Please check out Marie Belle's work. Links will be in the bio. Have a great day. Let's keep blooming.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.